Welcome everybody. Just a quick agenda for today. I'll first give a very brief introduction about a little bit of background for the session, what we're doing, why, a little bit of background on RDARI, what it is. Then we'll have a session. Then Rory will speak briefly about the Global Open Research Commons Interest Group, of which he is a co-chair. And then we'll get into our presentations for the day, the first of which is virtual. And then we also have Matt here. So Jerry will be coming in virtually, Matt's here in the room, and James will also be speaking. He's also here in the room. And then we should have an interested discussion about this topic. So first, a little bit of background on the research data architectures for research institutions interest group. I think we were trying to win a prize for the most convoluted and complicated interest group title. I think we got reasonably close. We always just talk about it as RDARI because it's easy. It doesn't sound terribly comfortable, but at least I think we find it easy. So the focus is very much on what do research institutions have in the way of research data architectures, and architectures in quite a broad sense, and what sort of considerations are taking place within research institutions in this evolving landscape. And we've had a number of discussions and topics over the many years. We've been around since, I think, 2014, 15 or something? Yeah, 2014. Yeah, so yes, we've been around since about 2014, and we're very much an interest group. So we pick off topics of interest, and that can vary quite widely. So you'll see here that we've done working from the bottom upwards. One of the more exciting activities was a benchmarking survey, bringing together, letting institutions all show what bits of architecture they had and what they thought was of importance. After that, we picked off a whole range of different topics that were of relevance to institutions. One of the recent sessions, which generated quite a lot of interest, was the data retention discussion and what are institutions doing around data retention. And I'm joined here by sorry, I didn't actually introduce my co-chairs. My co-chairs are James Wilson from UCL and Rory McNeil from RSpace. So the topic for today, as we've been looking at the landscape, the broader international landscape in which research institutions operate, of course, the big buzzword that's been coming up quite a lot recently is these open research commons, or open science commons. There's a lot of different interpretations for these thingies. And as institutions are faced with this, there's that question, what do you do with this development? How do you respond to this? What would you do with this? Is this actually really that important? Could you just ignore them? Could you put your head in the sand and it will all go away? Or rather, should you sit back and watch and see and take a bit of a laid back approach? Or do you want to be that forerunner, the one that's out of the starting blocks and first to respond to this challenge? You're seeing that these research commons exist in a lot of different shapes and forms. Some of them are regional, some of them are national, some of them are international at a larger scale, some of them are thematic, some of them are across all disciplines. There's a bit of a diversity there. And we were looking at this and going, well, we need actually some considered thought on that. And that's where we started talking to the Global Open Research Commons interest group, because who've been actually trying to categorize and better unpack what an open research commons actually is. Rory's also in those groups, and that's why it was really great to have Rory in to be able to provide the first-hand experience on that. So now I'd like to hand over to Rory, and Rory can speak on the perspective of the Global Open Research Commons interest group and what they're doing, and then we can start on our presentations. Advance to the right.
Thank you, Keith, and hi everyone in the room, and hi everyone online. As Keith said, I'm Rory McNeil. Okay, great. So there are a lot of definitions of research commons, and I don't think anyone should own the definition. And I like this definition, so I'm just using it today. Because I think it really captures really the essence of the commons. So it says, this is Scott Yokel from Harvard University, and he said, what we need to do in a commons is to bring together data with cloud computing infrastructure and commonly used software, services, and applications for managing, analyzing, sharing data with the objective of creating an interoperable resource for a research community. I think interoperability is really becoming the watchword of the day, which is coming out in all sorts of discussions. So as Keith mentioned, as I think probably most of the people in the room know, the Global Open Research Commons group at the RDA released the Global Open Research Commons model last year, and I think it's really hit a nerve. And as Keith said, there's lots and lots of research commons being developed, all different kinds. There was an interesting discussion of the first meeting ever of the Health GORC this morning, which at which I mentioned interoperability, and I mentioned the fact that interoperability with research infrastructure at research institutions is one kind of important interoperability between commons. So the model, and I think many of you are probably already familiar with it, has a number of elements ranging from kind of soft governance elements, which are in white, to the harder technical elements, which are in blue on the model. And as people begin to build these out, I think an example that, again, that I was involved in was the creation of the first ever potential research commons, which is actually designed around the model, which is you see on the left side of the screen, which is Reason, which was a proposed international research commons for Norway. And again, we don't have time to get into the details today, but you can see that this is really focused on the technical services and tools element. And you can see, I think importantly, that it brings in the concept of the research data lifecycle, a number of research tools which are designed to be interoperable. And then a critical element which is emerging, I think, as a point of discussion is interoperability between storage and compute at the bottom on the one hand, and the tools layer at the next level. So I'm also introducing another element into the discussion, which is yet another RDA working group that I'm involved in, which is produce the Maldrith model, which is a map of the digital tools research landscape, which you can see depicted here. And the Maldrith model is really the research data lifecycle, and then to which at each stage of the lifecycle, various tools which are commonly used at that stage have been mapped. And then for each of the tools, we've come up with some representative tools for each of those stages. And one of the main focuses of the second year of both the GORC group and the Maldrith group, which are just kicking off now, is to try to figure out how we can work together and perhaps merge, or at least kind of co-locate, if you will, the Maldrith model and the technical and services element of the GORC model. So with this background, let me now turn to say that we have, as Keith said, three great speakers today. First, Jerry Riley, who's the interim director of BioFair, which is the new domain-specific biology-focused UK research commons, which again is going to be using the GORC model. That's kind of the GORC, the GORC perspective, the research commons perspective, and then Matt Chandler from Princeton, who's going to talk about research infrastructure that Princeton's building, and as Keith said, James Wilson from UCL. So we're going to get both the institutional perspective and the commons perspective. So with that, I hope I'm going to be able to seamlessly pass over to Jerry, who is online.
Thank you, Rory. So hopefully the technology will go seamlessly. So I'm going to try and share the slides. And
sorry, Jerry, we can't hear the audio in the room, so we'll just need to try to address that.
I will carry on talking just so that you can hopefully can you hear me?
Virtually, yes.
Oh, so it sounds like
for those of you online, if you
hear
just bear
me.
with us for a moment, we're just sorting out these technical
Okay.
issues, and then we should be on our way again.
Hi, Jerry, sorry, could we stop you for a second? We haven't got you in the room, I'm afraid. You're online, okay, but
Yeah.
in the room we're still showing the previous slides. So give us a second if that's okay. We'll just try and sort it out. Sorry about this.
Okay, and my slides aren't working properly online either.
Necesitaremos Zoom que se vea
Okay.
y pegarle la placa.
Is it your computer?
No, that's my laptop, but it's not connected to the slides or anything.
Yeah, we need to connect it to the Zoom. Yeah.
I can connect to Zoom, unfortunately, because it was updated, but we'll switch over.
We can put it another computer.
Well,
Sorry.
yeah, I couldn't because Zoom was updating. while I was doing it, so.
Okay.
Sorry. That's right. That's all right. Put it in there. Okay. There we are.
Excellent. ¿Aló? ¿Me conectas, porfa? Ok, ahí está. Ahora el sonido. Ahí debe estar, ¿no?
And we also need the sound.
Yeah, yeah. This is the, okay, maybe here. Hello?
So we can
Hello?
hear the room okay. Sounds like you can't hear me.
What is the name?
Yes, the problem is here in the room. We're not getting the sound from the Zoom.
Yeah. Jerry, do you hear
Yes.
me?
I can hear you just fine.
Jerry.
I can hear you, but it sounds like you can't hear me.
Jerry, yeah.
Welcome to Costa Rica. Pero, o sea, el del Zoom tengo que tenerlo abierto, ¿no? Ok. No.
Eso. Sigue sonando igual. Sorry. Ajá. No, hasta lo perdí. Yeah. Can you hear me, please? The Zoom? Ah, okay. Sí. Ajá. Pero lo encendí porque si no, no lo escuchaba.
Igual como está grabado, se va a escuchar más.
Jerry?
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes. I can hear you. Right. Let me reshare.
Jerry? You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
O sea, cuando lo activé fue cuando lo pudimos escuchar a él, si no, no lo escuchábamos. Ah. I think maybe it's this one. Sorry, guys. Yeah.
What just happened here?
I don't know. I think this is problem with the sound. Yeah. Sorry. Wow.
Maybe I get somebody in the room to read my notes out from the slides.
Okay.
Give my presentation for me.
And see you. Sometimes. Now we call to the.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I don't know how to stop this. No. Jerry? Jerry, can you speak?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you. Can you share your screen?
Right, let me.
That's looking promising, yes.
Okay, can you hear me and can you see the screen?
Yes. You can now progress. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me get going while the technology holds together. So thank you, everybody. What I want to do is just give you a very quick run over of what we're doing with Biofair UK. As Rory said, this is a new digital research infrastructure focused on the UK life sciences. So we're geographic and thematic. We're very early stages. We are in this startup phase. So I'm not going to talk about deep architecture, but more about the rationale behind what we're doing and a little bit of overview. So as probably people are aware, life sciences these days are really a data-intensive discipline, and that's increasingly complex in terms of data modalities and volumes of data, but it's also increasingly complex in terms of the level of fragmentation. So within the UK, the challenge we face is that we have in excess of 120 research performing organizations in life sciences, probably in excess of 200 project consortia, not 100, and over 100,000 researchers funded through UK research, UKRI funding that cover the medical and biological sciences. So this is a really large community. And it's highly fragmented. There's great things going on in many, many places, but it's poorly connected. And that fragmentation results in a high level of duplication. So what we're trying to do with Biofair is drive a culture shift around FAIR principles. So drive a culture of sharing, so findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability to reduce the duplication, better connect the UK's research around data-intensive life sciences. And that for us is not just about data. Data is clearly really important, but it's also around methods, it's around training materials, it's around workflows. So it's around all the potential research assets. And this came out really as an initiative out of the Elixir community. It's for a whole variety of reasons connected to COVID and elections and things like that. So this has taken us 6 years to get through approval through our UKRI funder and through our government, and it has had to go to senior government level for funding. But the great thing about coming out of the Elixir community is we're coming out of a community-driven approach to what we want to do. So we build upon the basis that there is already a rich set of tools, a rich set of capabilities that we can draw on. And Biofair will be very much based on funding out through community, delivering through the community, and reusing the tools capability that already exists. So we have significant funding, and what we'll be doing is looking to draw those tools together to create a cohesive digital research infrastructure, federated digital research infrastructure across the life sciences community. The funding was finally approved in July this year. We had a slight delay due to the government running away and us getting an election, but we finally got approval on the 10th of July this year, and it's a £34 million investment over the next 5 years. And the perspective from government was very much that they see this as a first 5 years, and this is a long-term view. It, as everybody in this discussion knows, building out research commons takes time. It takes time to show value. So we expect this to be much more than a 5-year mission. Five years is a startup stage, really, in an infrastructure. So the objectives, and our objectives are quite broad here. For Biofair, around driving culture change. It's around driving the adoption of FAIR principles and enabling the research teams, research professionals to have the capability to adopt those FAIR principles, to defragment the landscape across the UK, improve access to data. We have some institutions and some groups within some institutions that are really well catered for. They have a mature approach to research data management. They have great skills among their data steward community, and we have others who struggle much more with connection and capability. Skills is a really important part. A lot of our funding, about 70% of our funding, is actually focused on people rather than compute and storage. And it's about driving an improvement in the way the skills in the research data management community are valued. So about building capability to attract, develop, and retain excellent research data management skills. But ultimately, it's about driving reuse of data, reuse of methods. It's to eliminate the duplicative waste that's going on across our community. So what we're envisaging doing here, and we are in the startup phase, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, is it's about joining the dots. It's about joining the various digital research infrastructures and data hubs and repositories that already exist in the UK, and connecting those to an infrastructure that will consist of a data commons, a method commons, and a knowledge center and a people center. So we're leading really with method because we see that as the, quite honestly, the soft entry to get people to share their workflow capabilities, to have a method catalog, but also importantly to invest in national level infrastructure for the key workflow engines such as Galaxy, Nextflow, SnakeMaker, etc. Connecting that with a data commons, and very much that's a federated view. It's not a view that we're looking to create a centralized repository, but very much connect together using sort of data objects, so RO crates technology probably, to federate together a data commons where teams can collaborate and cooperate with some repository capability and some compute capability. But we're not looking to take away from the capabilities that already exist out on the edges, but to support this with skills. So a knowledge center where we can really build world-class capability around training materials and also training capability, but also supported through a people center. So one of the things we really heard from the community is that they struggle with skills, they struggle with peer support. They want to be able to talk where we talk about driving FAIR principles, they want to be able to share ideas, but also have the support to do that. So we will be investing heavily in a skills-driven approach around the community. But this will all draw on capabilities that are already exist, skills capabilities that exist, but tools and services that exist. Our model will also be a model which will be what we call a hub and spoke delivery model. So we're currently recruiting into our biofair hub, which will be a small centralized coordinating function. We have just recruited a permanent director. We will be making an announcement very shortly of who that is, and we're recruiting a small team. But the key delivery will be through delivery partners, what we term spokes, and these will be people who may have key capability around perhaps delivering a method commons, the key elements of a method commons, but not from a research perspective, but from a service delivery perspective. So we will be doing open calls to recruit and deliver these capabilities, but we will be selecting on the basis of proven excellence, operational capability, production level capability. This isn't funding to do research, but by doing this, we will hopefully draw on the capabilities across the UK, across the Elixir community, but also beyond the UK and beyond, so that we draw on the internationally equivalent and complementary capabilities that exist. We, as I said right at the beginning, we are very much in startup mode. We've spent 6 years putting together this proposal. I've been involved for the last 15 months, primarily getting it through our funding councils and through meetings with government. We have approval, so we're out of phase 1, phase 0. We're now in phase 1, which is very much delivering the governance capabilities, the monitoring, evaluation capabilities, and recruiting into the hub. And then in the early part of next year, we will start to build out and start to look at building MVP capabilities for the key four functions that will be part of biofair. And with that, conscious of that we lost a little bit of time, I wanted to rattle through quite quickly. I'm going to stop and let Rory go on to the next speaker. I don't know, Rory, whether you're planning to take questions between speakers or just let us all run through and then include it all in the discussion. So back to Rory.
Hi. Thanks, Jerry. That was great.
We're getting a lot. I don't know if it's just me, but I'm getting a lot of echo from the room. Yeah, it's obviously not just me.
Is that going to be better?
We know about the echo. We're going to try to fix it.
How about now?
Right, that's better.
Okay.
Yeah, it's better. It's quite quiet, but it's less echoey.
Sorry, we can't hear anybody online now. So either we get echo or we get no audio. And that's what we're going to live with for now. Okay.
We can bring this slide back up now.
Yeah, can we switch back to the main presentation? Great. Thank you everyone for your patience. We are persisting through. There's been a lot of complications at this conference and we're still going ahead. We're doing it. So I'm Matt Chandler and I'm coming from Princeton University. I'm going to talk about another perspective and I'm very interested to have the conversation later on. The project I work on is called Tiger Data. Do you need something from me? No, you're all set. So let me tell you just a little bit about Tiger Data. Our goals are we're a local data management system. This is something new at Princeton University. We've had data management services, we've had data storage systems, and now we're bringing them together. So our goals are to deliver scalable data management. This was the proposal that came into the provost and that we got funded for. So we need to look to the next generation of data. It's growing exponentially. We need to be prepared to do that. And the primary strategy we have is to take a data management approach, not just continuously buying more and more storage without a lot of organization or cleanup or metadata or anything. So it's going to improve visibility across the university. It's going to serve all disciplines, all use cases, the broadest scope we can have within our institution. And the goal is to propel more data-intensive research. So more collaboration, maximizing the impact of funding. That's the big picture. Let me tell you a little bit about what it looks like on our campus. The two key groups that are involved in this are on the data management expertise side. That's my team for the Princeton Research Data Service. We're housed in the library. Our close partners are with Princeton Research Computing. This is now under our Dean for Research. They are our data storage experts as well as our high performance computing experts. But Tiger Data, interestingly, for this discussion, doesn't include the compute side. That's out of scope for Tiger Data. We're only focused on the storage and data management side. But we have a number of stakeholders who are involved, and it's been a long ramp up to get to where we are now, where we're just beginning to deliver storage for some of our early adopters. And when I say just beginning to deliver, we're delivering multiple petabytes of storage already because we had this pent up demand, but we aren't quite releasing it to the wider campus just yet. We're getting there in the coming months. So our approach is to have multiple layers. We have storage at the base, and our intention is to be able to purchase multiple different appliances and technologies. This is all on premises right now. Princeton has its own data center, and all of these things live there. We elected not to purchase any cloud services just yet because at the scale that we were looking at, it was cost prohibitive. That may change, and we may open that up. Whatever the technologies, our intention is to keep growing this base tier. And we're able to do that because we now have a data management system as a middle layer. So this has been interesting conversations with our RDARI group in the past. We don't actually use iRods. We use a vended product from Architecta called MediaFlux. And what that gives us is a number of features. It gives us data abstraction. So it doesn't matter what the back end is. It's delivered to the users in the same way. It gives us various security protocols, role-based access. It includes within it a metadata database for all objects that exist in the data storage, and gives us the potential to have various automations. So on top of that, we have user interfaces. I'm involved in a team that's working on building the web portal. This is a new custom web interface for project requests, project management, role changes, and so forth. And then direct access to the data is served by various file mounts, and that can come through really any protocol anybody wants, but right now it's pretty limited so far within our research computing systems. On top of that, Tiger Data has initiative for training, consultations, and that's the other part that me and my team are involved in. We're building the documentation, we're creating a data management training program for the role of data manager, and that is eventually building out a community of practice. So one of the key things to note, I can't go into all the details of our architecture, but it's a project-based architecture. The only way to get any new storage in Tiger Data is to create a project with specific roles assigned, and we automatically mint a DOI for every new project that comes in. We use DataSite to do that. We keep things as draft until somebody's ready to move it out to the public, but that is the identifier that we assign to every project from the beginning. So whoever has access to Tiger Data only has that access by virtue of their role in relation to specific projects. The wider vision, we also have a data commons at Princeton University. Our Princeton Data Commons, another thing that I'm involved in, it's the same team of engineers that are building the data commons infrastructure as are building the front end for Tiger Data. Because we have those DOIs and that project organization, and there's a required metadata that goes along with that, we intend to have a pipeline from Tiger Data, which is this working internal storage, to our public data repository. The back end, if you're curious, is Amazon S3 for our public repository. I mentioned that everything is on premises for Tiger Data at the time being. In the future, that may change. Our data commons may end up using on-premises storage to deliver the public data access. Okay, so we developed all of this in parallel to the conversations about the GORC model. And I've been interested to learn more over the last year and a half or so about what's been going on. But just the reality of the way that these conversations developed at Princeton is it was independent. So what I want to try to do with the rest of my time here is to connect some dots, to show you where I see some connections, similarities. So there are a variety of themes from the GORC model that are evident in Tiger Data. I showed the slide about the community engagement, community of practice, training, building the human capacity. We hired a bunch of staff for this new project, and that's been a recurring theme from these other discussions, is how much you need to invest in the human capital. Interoperability, we have a variety of challenges to address in our own system because of the different layers and the modules for that. And we have a working group that's assigned to deal with questions of metadata, metadata schema, the standards, the way that we're using persistent identifiers, the way that we're encouraging all of that. I mentioned data abstraction before, and I don't have time to touch on all these, so I'm going to keep moving. I'll tell you about some of the challenges that we're dealing with Tiger Data. So first of all, building the custom web application is a huge chore. It takes a lot of investment. We have a team of 6 engineers plus me as the product owner, and a design team now we recently brought on. There's 4 different individuals that are involved in that. And it's going to be a continuous effort because we're trying to meet the demand of the researchers and give them tools to make data management easier for them throughout the entire life cycle, and starting from the beginning with Tiger Data, which they didn't have before. So I don't know how we're going to keep up with all the data growth trends, but we do have a strategy that's on the right path. That's going to be an enduring challenge. We do know that with the discussions we had about data retention last year, that if we don't have a strategy for deleting or migrating data out, then there's no way we're going to keep up. And one of the things that Tiger Data is going to do for us at Princeton is allow us to have the information at our fingertips to make decisions about data retention, how long is guaranteed, how long might somebody have to kick in and pay a little bit more if they want to keep it. There's an ongoing challenge at Princeton University for policies, enforceable policies. We're relying on a lot of goodwill for the time being. And the university is slowly moving towards where the rest of the world is going with open research practices. But the policies will need to catch up if we're going to be able to enforce them. For the researchers, we have to normalize the best practices, and the training is our main strategy for that, but it still relies on a lot of volunteerism, and we'll see how that plays out. Interoperability, I could talk for hours about that alone. But I'll just put it up there and see some nodding heads that you might have some idea about the challenges that we're dealing with. So I'm going to wrap up because time is short and talk about what I'm taking away as I look into the GORC model that I might bring back and apply to the next steps for us with Tiger Data. So we have ongoing stakeholder conversations, and they're complicated. People are bringing in all sorts of ideas from different places and different interests and different concerns. I think we could use the model to frame those discussions a little bit more systematically. We already have a procedure of maintaining consistent, continuous user feedback, and I think the GORC model reinforces that. It encourages us to keep doing that. Similarly, with the human capacity, if we're going to expand our storage capacity, we need the people who have the expertise to be able to support that as well. I think one of the things that we could do, practically speaking, in terms of challenges with policy, is we could work towards a code of conduct. There are some examples there. We can draw from others' experience, and we can take the recommendations of the GORC model directly and apply it to our conversations about policy. We can also use the GORC model as a framework to pull in additional community standards. That is our intention with metadata, to allow extensible metadata down to the file level. I mentioned metadata at the project level, but our goal is to have it all the way down to the file level. And there's all sorts of good precedent there that we want to draw in via the model. And then finally, I'll just say that we should be aligning whatever interoperability challenges and questions we have. We need to think of them both in terms of the technicalities and in terms of the organization. We have a cross-functional team that has been developed over a couple of years, and we are coalescing now, and we should double down on that as we continue our conversations about interoperability. All right, that's it from me. Let me turn it over to James.
Thanks. So I'm James Wilson. I'm Head of Research Data Services at University College London. Just a little bit of background information about the university, because this does make a difference. Looks as though it works still. Good. Okay. So we are a large multidisciplinary research university. So we really do cover a very broad range of topics, from fine art to physics. We've got about 7,000 research staff and about 6,000 postgraduate research students. And of course, we collaborate. And collaboration is an important element, which I'm going to stress, for most university institutions. So we work with all sorts of people who are based elsewhere, both in industry and in other institutions. We have a new department spun out of IT services called Advanced Research Computing, and that's where I'm based. And it's now where about 140 other people are based. We've grown. When we were research IT services, there was about 40 people. We're now up to about 140. And this has made a huge impact in our ability to do all sorts of things to serve the research community. We do run high performance compute, trusted research environments, services for data management. We do run education. We run courses and so forth for data carpentries, software carpentries, and many other things besides. We have a dedicated team of research data stewards and indeed other professionals. So we have 15 official centrally employed research data students, data stewards at the university now, which is hugely important when it comes to having that resource to actually interact with our research community. And of course, we do have our core mission to support researchers and research. And what I mean by separating those is we're not just doing what the researchers want us to do, although that's a very important part of what we do. It's how we get our money. But we also are interested in improving how research works, even if researchers don't necessarily pay too much attention to how they make their data reusable. We do. And one of the ways which data stewards get involved is by becoming embedded in research groups, so that they can actually offer their special expertise to that group to help make data shareable. We want to work with Research Data Commons. We want to work with external groups and infrastructures that are out there to serve the research community. If our researchers want to work with them, and they do, then part of our job is to support them doing that. So we've worked with various EOSC projects in fields such as computational medicine and so forth. We have lots of people who work with the Elixir network and doing things related to that. And part of our job is to support these things. Now, I hadn't thought too much about Research Data Commons before doing this. And looking at the GORC model, and you'll get no end of the GORC model, I think, over the course of this conference. But I kind of thought to myself, actually, we're doing quite a lot of the things that the GORC model suggests anyway. And it started me thinking, are we a Research Data Commons? We certainly define and provide governance. We have all sorts of wonderful committees at various levels that look at data governance. We actually now have our own governance structure. So we have a separate group, a sort of a subgroup that looks after research data and governance as it applies to research data rather than data more broadly. We certainly provide policies. We use Microsoft AD for authentication and access. We have all sorts of issues about when we do work with collaborators, the policies for how we allow access to particular things, particular aspects of data, how when people leave the university or a collaboration comes to an end, what we then do enabling access for, say, a defined period of time beyond the actual collaboration and things like that. We have a complex sustainability model that draws in money and resources from various different routes. We certainly try and engage our researchers at various stages of their life cycle, and we're getting better at it. It's one of the great challenges, but we're getting better. We have very much a collaborative model for working, for education. We set up our own communities of practice. We have a community of practice for people doing research data stewardy things in UCL beyond the actual core team. We run our physical infrastructure. We run private clouds. We use public clouds. We tap into the big public clouds offered by AWS and Google and so forth. We run services and tools. We have our own storage. We have our compute. We have electronic notebooks and all sorts of other services that are there for helping people manage their data. We're looking at having sort of research objects as both inputs and outputs. We publish data. We apply DOIs to things. We also bring data into the university from third-party providers, and we provide access. We sort of do it on behalf of all the departments and then can manage who gets access to what data when it's sensitive. The one I put a question mark against is interoperability. And I will actually talk a little bit more about that. I'm not gonna shy away from it, but I don't have easy answers. One thing to note, this all makes it sound as though we have a research data commons. I'm not sure whether we do, and maybe some of the GORC specialists can advise on this, because we don't have that kind of single portal, that single interface that Tiger Data is developing. We're working on one. We're working on a data model that will cover all our services, but they're all very much independent services at the moment. Does that disqualify us? I'm not sure. So levels of interoperability. So here is a typical research data lifecycle. And whilst you won't be able to read all of the things around that, basically what we've tried to do is break out all the kind of tools and services that our researchers use at different stages in the life cycle. The ones that are red are the ones that we provide. So hopefully what that illustrates is whilst we provide services and tools to support our research across the research data lifecycle, there are lots of other things that researchers use. We don't control everything. And I think when we talk about interoperability, we need to think in at least 3 different dimensions. So internally, we have a degree of interoperability. When people use one service, they can take some of the output, some of the metadata generated by that, and move that on to the next stage around that life cycle. It's what Rory refers to, I think, as vertical integration. And we have a degree of vertical integration. Externally, well, we work and our researchers work with all sorts of different bits of software, some obvious like the Microsoft suite, some very specialized for particular disciplines. Where they have APIs, we can try and integrate them to some way. They don't always. So there's various different degrees of interoperability we can achieve, not just that we have achieved, but we could potentially achieve with external tools and services. And with commons or with other commons. This is something that we want to do, we have done in the past, but it's very much a customized kind of thing. It's quite an overhead. It takes quite a lot of time to really work with other commons. And what we would love to do is try and take it from this slightly fractured model with bits of interoperability here and there and turn it into something that's far more interoperable, in which we can actually mix the tools that we provide, which data commons provide, and which our researchers want to use from external sources. So we don't have control over everything, but the more we can help people use our mix of tools, the better we're serving our researchers. The researchers, we can't tell them what tools to use. They will use the tools that meet their needs the best. So it's not any kind of self-contained ecosystem. That's more than we can realistically hope to achieve. Metadata is, of course, vitally important for interoperability. We have an issue at the moment that all our different services, they all come from different places. They're all designed for different things, and therefore they capture different metadata. Because, you know, when you design a tool, a service, when you buy one in, it captures the metadata that it needs to be run in itself and meets the purposes that it seeks to meet. But it doesn't necessarily have any kind of underlying model. So Matt was talking about having the project as the kind of single basic model. Now, we do that with our data storage system. That's project-based. You apply as a project to use that. But all the different tools we have work on completely different kind of organizing principles. Bringing them together is hard work. We have particular problems with things like scientific equipment, which is often highly customized. They want to build their own walled garden to keep people coming back and using their software. They're not necessarily interested in operability. We have lots of closed source software components which add to the challenge. We're looking at the sort of fair digital object, the kind of RO crate kind of object, as a way in future to package things up with extensible metadata schemas so we can capture what's needed for each thing without those kind of barriers. But that's still a long way to go. And there are a number of other questions which I'm just going to draw everyone's attention to before we reach the discussion phase. So first of all, no institution is an island. We cannot hope to serve the needs of our researchers as an institution. We can certainly help them. We can give them clear signposting. We can provide them with things that they're not going to get for free from other institutions. We serve communities, but we also plug gaps between communities. So when we started our own research data repository, we wanted, and we still want, researchers to use specialized repositories for their own fields, but they don't exist. We did a survey, so out of date now, this is back in about 2016, where we asked people, you know, do you have a specialist data repository for the data that you produce in the course of your research? 80% of our researchers said they didn't have one. They didn't have anywhere to really publish their data. I'm sure that's reduced a lot now, but there are still many fields that kind of fall between the cracks. And we are obliged really to help and support them. Between different institutions, we're a big institution. Princeton is a big institution, but there are huge variations in the kind of scale and scope that some institutions have. So some institutions can't even hope to provide the kind of basic stuff that we do. How do we manage to bring those into the ecosystem and not end up with big gaps in fair data where you have institutions that can't really afford to support it? Do we pool resources? Are there other ways of doing this? Institutions have many stakeholders, not all of whom are remotely interested in fair data, data sharing, and data reuse. So most of our financial decisions are taken by bean counters, quite frankly, who understand little about research, and it's very hard to persuade them. We're lucky that we've got a few quite senior people who've really brought into the agenda here, but it's different people in a university. It's a big organization. They have different aims and objectives. Institutional metadata versus subject community metadata. I'm not going to focus on that because we are running out of time and there's a lot I could say. Then there are some basic questions. Who owns data? Who holds data? We'd rather not hold the data because it costs money. If we can get a research data commons to hold data that UCL researchers have created, that's great. Means that somebody else is bearing some of the costs. But then who governs the data? Who pays for what? It's terribly important if you're running an institution. The variable levels of curation that we can offer as an institution, we can only offer a certain amount of generic curation, really. You can get much better levels of curation, potentially, at the sort of data commons levels. And I was also thinking about where institutions have particular advantages and so forth. And I'd already came up with this yesterday when I heard somebody else talk about it, but managing data during the active phase of research before you're sharing it, but you need to make sure you're readying it for sharing, is perhaps one of those areas where the institution can step in with all those storage tools, the ability to apply metadata at the file and folder level, which we're looking at as well at the moment. So all of these kind of questions. That's my bit. We're going to move on to a general discussion. We're going to reflect on some of these topics. We did come up with some talking points to start off with, but I think based on the presentations you've seen since then, hopefully people have thought of other kind of questions and ideas, maybe even solutions to some of our problems. I will pass over to Rory, who's going to, I believe, chair the conversation. So far, thanks, Rory.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I think I feel like we should give a big round of applause to James and Matt and Jerry, because I thought those were fantastic presentations. I really mean it. I think that was this really eye-opening, almost groundbreaking stuff. So I'm going to start out with two questions myself. And I think, James, thanks to you, you really reflected a lot in your discussion, not only on what's happening at UCL, but on how it already does relate and could relate to Biofair or other research commons. And as you mentioned, you've already worked with things like EUDAD, so you have some experience and you've got the willingness to do it. So I like to ask difficult questions. So I hope Matt and Jerry are getting nervous. But so I won't ask James any questions because of that. But I have my first question is for Jerry, and then my second question is going to be for Matt. So Jerry, I know you've already reached out because you did your workshops with a number of the universities that are involved in Elixir and therefore will be involved in Biofair. And you've just heard James kind of reflecting on, okay, what is the advent of something like Biofair going to be for a university? And I know that your intention is to work with the community. Could you, and I realize also it's very early on, so you haven't really had a chance to take a deep dive on this, but in terms of the institutional partners, the institutional aspect of the community as opposed to the actual researchers or research organizations, there is obviously some areas where Biofair and the universities are going to have overlapping capabilities, storage being one example. So have you thought about the process about which Biofair, I'm sure you have, tell us what you're thinking about, the process about which Biofair is going to engage on an ongoing basis with institutions as you go through these various 3 or 4 phases that you described that are going to happen over the next 5 years?
So hopefully you can hear me.
Hopefully we'll be able to hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Sorry, Jerry, bear with us while we try to get you back. Well, shall I put Matt on the spot while we wait for that?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Matt. Here's your turn. Okay, so I think we're lucky in the sense that we have a university from the UK and we have Biofair, which is a coming research commons for the UK. We don't have any equivalent in the US. But let me ask you, when you were building or when you were conceiving and building Tiger Data, did you think about anything like, say, the open storage network? There are some facilities in the US which are emerging, which purport to be elements of what could become a national research commons. Did you think that it might be interesting to work with any of them? Or did you think, gee, it would be nice if they existed and we had a research commons?
Thanks for the question. So if I'm honest about Princeton University, we have a lot of resources. And in many ways, the university wants to use those resources to contribute to the community. But in a lot of ways, the university wants to use those resources to make sure that our own researchers are competitive. So Tiger Data was conceived in the mindset, the same mindset that we have for our research computing infrastructure. So it's on premises, it's easy access, there's no cost back model to the researchers. It's just there and available. They ask, they submit things in the queue, and then they're able to do compute jobs. And where there's enough need, they go back and make proposals to the provost, and then we buy more machines and expand it out. And that's what makes our researchers competitive. So if I'm honest, that was more or less the mindset with Tiger Data as a seed. But then my service, the Research Data Service, was created simultaneously to some of these long-term discussions about what are we going to do about storage in the future. And so our team shifted the conversation a little bit to say that we need to be thinking about the wider ecosystem, and let's use our resources And let's make our researchers competitive, but let's plug it in. Part of the way that you can make yourselves competitive for funding applications is to show maximum impact. Part of the way that you can make yourselves competitive for funding applications is also to show that you aren't necessarily reliant on a lot of external resources, external organizations. And so Princeton can kind of be a hub for some multi-institutional collaborative research projects using our infrastructure to do that. So I think there's only so far that you can get with that mindset, though. I think, you know, to try to be competitive, to try to be ahead, and to make that argument that our researchers need the best resources available to them is only going to go so far, because I genuinely believe that the future of research is open, and that if we go to our mission, the university is in the service of the nation and in service of humanity. That's what we're trying to do. So if we're going to do that well, we need to be embedded in the network. And what I hope to do with Tiger Data and some of the other initiatives that we're building is to contribute. So I mentioned a metadata working group and a metadata schema. That's something we intend to open. This custom front end that we're building and investing a lot into that, it's open source. So there's a lot that will come out from our initiatives that I think will benefit the community. And then I hope we will continue to have conversations with other existing infrastructures, with other existing initiatives to be a part of it and not be isolated trying to win a race.
Great, thanks, Matt. Can we get Jerry?
Yes, good question. Jerry, can you speak?
I'm here. I can talk. That
So
doesn't
Jerry
look
is
promising.
coming through Zoom, but not in the room. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Sorry, I think it's going to be difficult to get Jerry through the speakers. Okay, they're working on it. In the meantime, it's not a question, it's a comment, and it's for you, Matt, and it's from Andrew Trelaw. He's one of the co-chairs of the Global Open Research Commons Interest Group. He's attending online. You talked about using the GORC model to frame stakeholder discussions. This is something that the SURF adopters in the Netherlands are already doing, and it would be great to talk to them about what they have found already works. And he's got a contact, and I'm happy to get you in touch. So, yeah. Matt's very happy with that. Thanks.
Keith, are there any other online questions before we open it up to the people in the room? Okay, we're just going to try to get Jerry back online in the room as well.
Okay.
Any questions or comments from people in the room? Yes, please.
Hi, really great presentations, great session. Thank you very much. I'm Limor Pierre. I'm at Yale University. I'm very interested in all of what you're doing. I guess my question is on it sounds like a basic question, but bear with me, about the institution as the relevant unit. And what I'm thinking about it here, and I believe in the role of the institution in all of these things for sure, but what I am observing is that in some cases, as one of the presentation mentioned, there's a lot of stakeholders with all kinds of interests. Even among the researchers, there's some that carry more weight because they bring in more funding to the institution and so forth. So if we're doing this for the institution, how do we serve the entire institution so we don't, for example, only serve one part of it and ignore, say, humanities or social sciences?
So I'll take that one if you like first. So yeah, my background's in humanities, and it's always been a problem that when you need to bring in income, it's much easier to sort of the medical community or something than it is the humanities. It's not easily overcomable, but it is part of the kind of mission of the department to serve all of the faculties across the university. So what we will do is we will do effectively some unpaid work to get the humanities in. But that doesn't mean to say it's necessarily a completely fair distribution across all of the communities, partly because they don't necessarily approach us as the kind of the technical people asking for support on things, but we are evaluated on whether we've actually worked across the university. So there is a kind of a non-financial pressure that, you know, we do get involved in humanities projects, as well as quite a lot of us actually rather enjoy the humanities projects as well. But it's very hard to be entirely even because we are ultimately dependent on getting involved with funded research projects from which we can, you know, employ people and bring in some money. So it's a hard balance to strike, to not simply ignore the subjects where there's less money sloshing around, but to make sure we are actually showing that we are supporting the entire university, and we shouldn't just be given a little bit of funding out of the overheads of a particular department. I don't know if it's different at Princeton.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a challenge for us. I mentioned that we are intending to meet the needs of all of the researchers at the university. And we've been intentional with the Tiger data discussions, at least, to bring in folks from all of the domains, make sure that we have members from the humanities who are on our steering committee. For example, we have a faculty-led steering committee. So we're intentional about having representation from all the domains. That said, it's still easy for humanists and social scientists to hear signals that indicate to them that they're not included in the discussion. So some of those signals might be something like, if you have a small amount of research data, if you have less than 100 gigabytes, then that's nothing to worry about. Easy peasy, we don't need to think about that. We're going to spend all of our time talking about the huge research data projects, and that might leave some people feeling left out. Another thing that we're doing with Tiger data is right now we don't have secure human subjects data in our system. So that forces us to focus on certain types of data. Oops, we got an echo again. Let me test it once more. How about now? Yeah. Let's try this. How about now? Can I try it once more? Okay, I'll just try not to trigger an echo, but I'm still going to use the microphone or else nobody online can hear us. And I lost my train of thought. I was talking about protected data. So we're not quite there for Tiger data, but we have to be if we're going to reach all the disciplines. And that's what makes me very interested in some of the other conversations about health data, other models that are, or other institutions that are applying the GORC model.
Hey, Jenny Larkin, National Institutes of Health in the US. This has been a fantastic session. Asking you to expand on something that you touched on with the Tiger data and Princeton, and that is coming from an NIH perspective. How do you, is it possible and should one ensure that your researchers put domain-specific data in domain-specific repositories? I'm just thinking, if I was a researcher in one of the institutions that has these wonderful things, guess what? I'd be like, oh, y'all have this wonderful infrastructure. Low-hanging fruit is I put it all there, and there are a lot of benefits from that. It can be all together with the related data of different types. all these good things. I'm assuming that all of these lovely data resources are also fully fair in the sense that people from outside your institution can also find them, access them, and use them. But at the end of the day, in my mind, a little bit, I think of the institutional data resources a bit like the generalist repositories, because you're not actually tuned and specialized in any one data type. I'd like to be wrong about that. So those are the things I'm wondering about and would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so we actively encourage people, if we think that there is a repository where they should put things, we will tell them to go and put it there. So in some ways, well, it's not, but that's fine because the curation levels are better. I mean, ultimately, it's not about having everything in the institution. It's about making sure that it's there to serve research, and that's ultimately what we're paid for. If we make the data fairer, if we can encourage it to go somewhere with better curation standards, that's a win. You know, and as I said, it also saves us a little bit of money in actually, you know, holding a copy of the data sometimes as well. But
it might be really interesting to actually focus on that, because you all mentioned interoperability, then danced away from it. So fair. Maybe to focus on that on a future session of really on the interoperability and how do you manage, for lack of a better word, a more federated.
yeah, absolutely true. And yes, once we figured it out, we'll tell you. But we're starting to really figure out how to interact with these research data commons, I think, and we already do a bit, but there's a lot to be done.
So on the topic of specialist repositories, Susanna, you might know, who's sitting right behind you, has made exactly the same comment at the Gray meeting in August. And so I've done a lot of thinking about that issue, and I think it's critical that the domain repositories, because interoperability between other tools and generalist repositories it takes effort, but it's quite doable because they all have really good APIs. The problem with the specialist repositories, they don't. And so, and also there's also different, and also some of them aren't very funded very well, so they can't, the problems, but that's the problem, but it's a critical thing. And I don't think it's the intention of the institutional repositories or the generalist repositories to supplant domain repositories. If you're interested, there's actually another session taking place tomorrow where specifically someone is talking about just this topic. It's the data curation and tools session, and Felix Shaw from COPO is going to speak about that issue of interoperability between, in their case, a domain repository and data. So I think that's generally recognized. To me, that's a critical issue which absolutely needs to be addressed. I actually think, if I can throw it back at you a little bit, I think the NIH could play a very useful role in stimulating that discussion.
I'll say a few words on this as well. So I mentioned the pipeline from Tiger Data into our own institutional repository, which is a generalist repository. It uses DataCite as the schema. So I also mentioned training. I'm going to continue to tell researchers through our data management training that you should choose the repository that's the best for your use case. And it's an easy sell in my experience so far, because I relate it to journals. You want to publish where people are going to read it. You want to publish to your audience. That is true for your manuscripts as well as for your data. So we'll continue to push that. As we sort out interoperability, first we have to nail down our own internal interoperability challenges. And we have to make sure that we have everything sorted out with DataCite, that it is a smooth pipeline from Tiger Data working data storage to our own Princeton Data Commons, which requires DataCite. If we meet our ambitions for Tiger Data and expand out the metadata schemas from community standards and allow researchers to input that metadata within our own systems, then my hope is We're also paving pathways for interoperability with other repositories. Rory noted there's going to be challenges, but I think there are a variety of ways that we can try to approach this. Maybe there's not a direct API that works for us, but maybe we can remove a step for the researchers. We can have them input their metadata into our system. We can export it in a format that is uploadable to the repository, so there's less forms to fill out. Maybe there's some way we can make it a little bit easier for them, and then they can't reply to us. You're advising us to do things that are the hardest thing to do, and you're making the things that you don't advise the easiest. So we have to align those things. And that's another point that I think the GORC model does well to emphasize.
Okay, a quick one, Susanna, because I was going to call questions, but since you raised your hand, yeah, but just really quick because we're out of time.
Oh yeah, okay. So when Susanna Assunta Santoni, University of Oxford, where I am the academic lead of research practice, and we try to build a common for the University of Oxford. So when I read the definition of the data commons, I read this cloud-based, platform. To me, that's not what primarily an institutional commons is. To me, an institutional commons is, it's more like, when Jerry mentioned the biosphere, it's a common of people, it's a common of service and tools. Where data, yes, there is obviously institutional data and repository. However, I want to follow up on the comment on serving all the disciplines, because as an institution, we need to serve all the disciplines. We need to think about which are the core elements, the core expertise, the core digital resources, the core enabling mechanism that we need for all the disciplines. And then what is bespoke, and actually, which is more domain specific. And to me, the core part forms what an institutional commons should think about. So it's not just about the data in the cloud. It's probably the hardest part because it's so very discipline specific need of the data. But the genetic training, the genetic infrastructure, and the support around it, to me, it's actually what form the core at the institutional level. Yeah, thank you. Oh, thank you very much for the great session. I will definitely follow up.
Okay, great. Thanks, Susanna. Okay, I think that was some, thank you. Let's have a round of applause for the questions. Great questions too. And and apologies to Jerry. We've been trying to get you online, but we haven't been able to. So thank you so much. And I can see, hi, Jerry. Thank you so much. Maybe if you have time, if you feel like it, you could give us a written comment on the question, but thanks so much. And now I'm going to pass it over to Keith to wind up.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you for our online participants, but also thank you very much here in the room for bearing with us as we were trying to get the technology working. Thank you for the very interesting discussions and the wide-ranging views, the interpretations of the Global Open Research Commons, trying to see where that relates to an institution, whether you can just apply it straight or what these emerging international and national global open research commons look like, and where that informs the design of what you provide within the institution. So I hope this was at least helpful in progressing that discussion a little further. Please, if you are not already a member of either of these interest groups or working groups, please join up either to the Global Open Research Commons interest group or some of the working groups that are working under that, or please join the Research Data Architectures in Research Institutions interest group. And thank you again for your time, and big plug for next year, Australia. So I hope you'll be able to make it, and I hope we'll be able to see you there for to progress these discussions. Thank you all for your time.